the next generation to a family farming business is one of the greatest achievements many of the dairy families I talk to strive for, yet it's also one of the most complex and challenging. And that's why we are continuing our conversation with Galen Smith of Coldstream Farms, pivoting from technology to family farm transition, including the strategy for how his father-in-law brought him into the family business, the process of making decisions to drive profitability and keep the farm forward, and what he is doing to create opportunities for his 4 sons to come back to Coldstream Farms. If family farm transition is on your mind, this episode is for you, here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This episode is part of the High Performance Mindset series powered by Nedap. Nedap is future-proofing dairy farming with smart technologies and activity monitoring, cow locating, milk metering, sort gates, and AI-powered camera systems. Nedap is improving life on the farm by putting the right cow in the right place at the right time, every time. When we have these conversations, it's fun to talk about where you've come from and where you're going. But one thing that really stands out to me in your story too is the generational piece. And you alluded to this earlier on, that you married into a dairy family and stuck around. I want to just spend a minute on this part of our conversation because this is something that I talk about with not just on the podcast here, but when I'm sitting down with dairy farmers across the country. And it's really a challenge for many families and even non-family members too, to look at how to pass a farm on to a next generation. Sometimes that next generation is family. Sometimes it's people that are not immediate family. And you mentioned too, there's people that are part of the team there that are your siblings, right? You have a brother that's part of the farm. So there's just all these different dynamics that exist in the world that families and farms are trying to navigate through to be able to pass on a viable business to the next set of ownership. So tell me a little bit about how it's worked for you, because it seems to me that you're kind of a success story, a success story in and of itself. So how has this all unfolded at Coldstream?
Well, there's a couple things that before we even start to talk about transition on a farm is our approach to our daily life on the farm. Number one, we have to be financially successful. If we don't make money, no one wants to come back or can't afford to come back and be a part of that. But outside of that, are we passionate? Do we enjoy what we do on a day-to-day basis? Are we constantly looking to the future, or are we kicking the dirt, complaining about what's going on, and having no conversations with our kids, and us in the back of our mind expecting them to come and take over the farm? And if that's the scenario, it's never going to happen. So my perspective has always been, number one, as a dad and a father of 4 boys, what do I need to do to create an atmosphere that they want to come back to the farm? Number one, we have to be successful. Number two, we have to enjoy what we do. Number three, we have to be inventive and creative and create opportunities in the future for everyone to come back and take ownership. With that in mind, that has to be step one. I will say that I feel extremely fortunate. I have served on a lot of YC boards for our co-op, for CHS, for semen companies, National Milk Producers Federation. And one of the questions that's always asked is, how are you handling generational transition? And the most response that I hear all the time is, we're not talking about it. Probably 80 to 90% of the time. So as dairymen, how do we typically, that's our plan, is a family dimensional operation, agricultural operation. We want our kids to come back and be part of what we're doing. But if we're not even having those conversations, the chances of that succeeding are pretty slim. So take all that into consideration. I feel extremely fortunate. My father-in-law, Jeff, and my mother-in-law, Vicky, early on decided that, hey, we want this to be a family farm, and how can we make this viable for whoever may come and want to be a part of that? And they have given us as owners an opportunity to purchase shares of theirs from the business, right? So we acquire shares. That can be tough. As a young farmer, I don't have the cash flow to pay for shares today. Well, what we have done, or what they set up with our accountants and a lot of outside help and work, we're not obligated to pay shares today. If the farm is profitable, let's just say to the tune of profit sharing that Galen and Laura get $100,000. We're obligated to spend 90% of that to pay back to buyer shares. 10% we get to keep and decide what we do with. And so now we have skin in the game. We're an owner. We have the ability to work hard. And when the farm does well, we get to share in that. And it's been that way for every other member on the farm. The other thing is open in conversations. We have a meeting every single month, financial meeting. Books are open. We all have different parts of the farm. My wife does all of our payroll and accounting, but anybody that wants to take a look at the books and having a monthly meeting with our accountants to discuss financials and a platform to discuss and bring things up in somewhat of a neutral environment has been really beneficial. When you're not having those conversations and you're a son or a daughter or someone on the farm that has put in 40 or 50 years on the farm with certain expectations and those don't happen, huge turmoil within the family. Not having conversations lead to misunderstandings. And so our ability to do that and have platforms where we can talk about it and discuss it, the ability for the next generation to acquire shares from the previous generation through profits has worked very well for us. And so I absolutely love working with my family, but sometimes it can be stressful. And we have to be mindful how we treat each other, because in 2 days from now, or Thanksgiving or Christmas, whatever the holiday might be, we're going to sit down and enjoy a meal together. And so we can't just blow each other off. We have to find manageable solutions to implement the goals that we have on the farm. And part of that means that sometimes I don't always get my way, right? But I think just as we talk about our nutritionists and our advisors, our bank, our semen companies, those are all advisors. And that's how we view each one of the members on the farm, that collaboratively, we're going to come together with the best decision. And it might not be the direction that I wanted to go today, but ultimately I feel that it's the best decision for our farm, because the goals of the previous generation are not the goals of the current generation. And so how do we make sure that everybody is comfortable with those decisions? Part of having a good partnership is being the right partner. And we have to invest in that and realize that my goals aren't always the same as somebody else's. And so having those conversations, setting the platform for the next generation. So now almost being 50, I've got a son that's back on the farm. He graduated from Garrett. He graduated from Montana State University with a degree in ag business and economics. And so he's back on the farm and he's got ideas that I'm not thinking about. So how do we incorporate all those things and instill the next generation that same desire to want to drive and succeed and be passionate? And I think my father-in-law has done a fantastic job of setting that base that we can take this farm into future generations.
I appreciate you just kind of going into that depth at which your mother and father-in-law approached the whole transition process. Before there was the talk of the transition of the business, there was open conversation, there were financial meetings, open books, and there was a dialogue that was built around that type of communication. And it sounds like that right there was really fundamental to being able to have the next conversation when that time came of, do you want to be involved, right? And so when you can see the numbers, look at the books, and then that, as you talked about, it's got to be a profitable business. So you know what you're getting into, but also you talked about, I'm going to call it attitude, the attitude at which you look at the work you're doing every day and the one that you walk around with, because that's going to impact the interests of the next generation. So you talked about how there's a very collaborative approach with the folks on the team and your advisors that you surround yourself with. And so when there's a new idea that comes up, or perhaps a new technology to consider investing in, and you admit it, sometimes you don't always get your way, is there like a formal process that the team has adopted for taking a new idea to that, I'm going to call it your board of directors, right? And so is there a process that you have for taking a new idea to your board and deciding whether or not to move forward with it? delete it or postpone it. What does that look like at Coldstream?
So let's just take the CowScout collars because we've had lots of other ones. We've had ventilation, automation systems, misting systems, parlor cooling, but most recent has been our CowScout collars. And so really we knew we had technology that was failing. We'd already identified a problem. We knew that 55% heat detection with our current monitoring system in our palpation rails, we don't have the ability to go tail chalk, was not going to work. And so we knew we needed to invest in something. We've identified the problem and then we find multiple solutions. And so for us, we could have put lockups in our barn and tail chalked all the cows. We could have done a synchronization program. And really for us in the Cow Scout colors is and why we invested in that is we want to treat every cow like she's our only cow and make the best decision for what's best for her today, for her long term, for her lifespan. And so with that mentality, we then looked at different brands of collars. And when I say looked at, that's as a team. Hey, here's 3 different brands that are out there that are available. What do you guys think works the best for us? Integration is always huge. So as we said, hey, we need to have a program that's going to talk with our sort gates, talk with our record keeping system, and provide a monitoring information back to us. When we started putting those together, CowScout, along with one other company, came to the top. And then when we really looked at integration, it really came down to CowScout, the GEA platform that we already had in our parlor, in our sort gates. And so then we have to look at return on investment. 2,000 callers adds up, and new sort gates and time to do all that. What is the return on investment? Well, we worked with our semen company, with our reproduction specialists, with the Cargills, with the Zoetises, and had everybody do their own independent work and say, if we could take heat detection from 55 to 65% and increase conception rate by 3 to 5%, what does that dollar amount mean for us? And so very, very quickly, we were to say, well, also, hey, if you're trying to do things in a palpation rail and you're only catching 80% of the cows, not very good success. So that's part of that metric. So very, very quickly, hey, this thing's going to pay off in a year and a half. Okay, well, what's a bank note look like? And how long does it take to pay it off through there? So we analyzed all those things. Sometimes, to be honest, it might be a PowerPoint that I put together for our entire team. Sometimes it might be handouts that we look through, but everyone that is a member or owner, or even sometimes not, that just has input as to the decisions of the farm, is then involved in that decision and that process to evaluate, look at, and make a decision. It's trying to put all that information out in front of everybody. And it's not always me that has the idea. There's lots of other people that have great ideas, and we use that same process. What problem does it solve? What does it cost, or what will it save us, or how does it increase in efficiencies? What's the return on that? Do we move forward with the project or not? How does it benefit animal health or any of those things? So a little bit of a roundabout answer, but most of the time that would be the process. And obviously the Cow Scout colors is an example of that.
Thank you for sharing that example, a real life one, and one that plays right into our conversation today. But one thing that really sticks out to me too here, Galen, is that you enrolled some of those other stakeholders in helping to get the information and find those numbers to be able to look at those ROIs and paybacks. And it sounds like once you had all of that data collected and could lay it out on the table, in this case, it spoke for itself. It made a decision pretty easy for everyone to see that it was the next right move. So I appreciate you going into the detail and sharing what those steps have looked like. You mentioned too that you now have a son that's back on the farm, and what a blessing, the oldest of your 4 boys that wants to continue on with this way of life that your family is so proud of and has worked so hard for. And so as you look at him and wish to set him up for the best future for himself, is there anything that you will do differently for him than what your in-laws had done for you? And not because they did anything wrong, but maybe because times have changed and things have changed. What will you do for your son in his early 20s that you believe is the next right step to set him on his own right path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, don't want to discredit anything that my father-in-law has done and my mother-in-law that have done for my wife and I and for this business. But part of being that group is I probably would have adapted to more growth. I maybe said that earlier that we've always been better before bigger. And so when we built our 50 stall rotary, we had the capability to milk 2,200 cows. We were milking 1,200. We knew that growth would come, but we wanted to do that in a responsible way. I probably would have done it much faster. The next step is to still put on another 600 cow barn, milking 1,800 cows currently. So I think I recognize that we need to continue to grow. And that doesn't always mean, like I said before, more cows. That's investment in embryo work, in genetics, and more milk per hour, more efficiencies. How do we do that? And so as I look to my son and what could I maybe let him do a little bit more than I didn't? Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of broken concrete and mistakes around this farm to show that my father-in-law let me make mistakes, but you have to let that next generation take some responsibility, show the initiative, show the passion, bring a project forward, and let them take it to fruition. Because if you don't, and you keep tapping them on the head, you slowly beat that desire, that passion down. And so my father-in-law, yeah, did not do that to me, but I think I want to instill that desire to grow and growth and whatever that might be. Can there be some guidelines and guardrails along the way? Most definitely, but it's okay to let them fail a little bit. And I think that's where I probably made some of the most growth in my career is through some failures or even seeing things that I thought were going to be fantastic somewhere else that were a failure. If we want these kids to be involved, they have to have the ability to take some ownership, and that doesn't necessarily mean financial. That could be an ownership of a project or a barn or picking out the next generation of our embryos, and let them have some skin in the game and let them fail because it happens. I still fail, probably more often than not, but I think that's where we find our growth as well. And if we're not constantly trying to push that envelope and encouraging them to do the same, we're really going to stifle that potential of the next generation.
You shared a powerful statement there that rings true, and I really appreciate you being willing to open up about not just the technology journey, but also the family farm transition journey. And I call it a journey because it's not over, and in fact, the next phase is really just beginning for you guys with your son coming back, and hey, 3 more boys of your own, and I'm guessing there's a few cousins running around there too.
We're pretty heavy in boys. My brother has one son, and my other partner, my sister-in-law, has 2 boys. So the farmer that had 3 daughters ended up with 7 grandsons.
I like the multiplication factor there. That worked out great. So, Galen, as we round out our conversation today, we are nearing the end of 2025, looking ahead into 2026. What are your big goals in the year ahead?
I would say goals for the dairy are always to produce more milk per cow, per hour, per dollar. And we talked about all the different mindsets of technology, how we do that, how we get there, analyzing projects. That's always at the forefront. I think sometimes too, dairy farming can be stressful. It can be tough. There can be financial challenges. Fortunately enough, as we collaboratively make decisions, we share that stress amongst everybody. It's just not one person that makes that decision. So that's very helpful. But I think about mental health for our industry. I think about my members in our co-op that are making really tough decisions this holiday season that they maybe not otherwise want to make. And that's us included. A decision to keep moving on is a decision. We're all making decisions, but sometimes we're forced to do those. But as I think about my goals and things that I want to accomplish in 2026, as we talk about more milk per cow, per hour, per dollar, it's feed efficiencies. How are we going to optimize our data with our current TMRs, making better forages, better quality, just giving us that higher return on investment. Labor efficiencies, we definitely do struggle with labor in our region. I will say that knock on wood, we have a really great team of guys. And to be honest, our employee turnover is extremely low. So we feel really fortunate about that. But as an industry, we definitely have some labor issues that we're faced with. And then really focusing on cow comfort, and that's tied to profitability, heat abatement, our stalls clean, good bedding, all those simple day-to-day things that we need to happen. We need to really continue to focus on genetics. I think that's one of the forefront things that are happening in our industry as well, that the turnover, especially within the Holstein population, is happening so fast. We work with a fantastic semen company, CMEX, and really happy with the platform and the embryos and the support that we get from them. So how do we focus on all these sometimes day-to-day things, but take them to a higher level to help return that profitability that we need as dairymen to continue our farm into the next generation? This year has been filled with so many challenges, but a lot of really meaningful progress as well. On the positive side of all that, farms that have invested in technology like automated milking systems, real-time monitoring, data-driven analytics, they've seen some real substantial gains. Those efficiencies will continue to be consistent on our farm. And so they've opened up new opportunities for us as producers to tap into maybe some cow potential that really maybe has always been there, but we haven't utilized. And so having those animal monitoring systems in place help us to be more profitable. We've obviously dealt with volatile milk markets. Global consumption seems to be fairly strong yet and steady, especially for cheese and whey protein, but it just hasn't been smooth. So many producers have felt squeezed, and the rising costs of day-to-day farm operations, especially in this last quarter, lowering farm gate prices, especially smaller operations, have really felt the pinch and have been extremely vulnerable. So in 2025, I'm reminded that resilience and the ability to be adaptive, they're not really optional anymore. You have to do that to survive. And so we take that mindset into 2026 as we try to instill our next generation to be successful and find those technologies and practices that continue to drive profitability.
And on that note, you have summarized well what 2026 looks like for Coldstream Farms and some of the big goals that you have to continue to drive profitability through technology and accessing some of that potential that's already built in genetically through data and environment and management, and it looks like it will be an exciting year ahead. So Galen, I'm going to push you for one last question before I let you go today and get back to work. So you talked about the farm goals, but do you have any personal goals or ambitions that you're working on in the next year?
I think one of my personal goals is we love to see the success of our children. I know I could be involved quite a bit more in our co-op and other things, but as I have a son that is still, my youngest son is still a junior in high school, one of the most rewarding things is to see him play sports and to be there and to be a good dad and to be a mentor. And so my time and my goals are always to spend that with my kids, with my family, with my wife. Sometimes it's tough as farmers to say I need just a little bit of me time, but I think it can be very much important. So there's quite a few hobbies that I enjoy. Hopefully I'll spend a little bit more time on. But now with the son back on the farm, we share a couple more goals together. So letting him maybe focus and take a little bit of a driver's seat in a couple small projects or areas that he think we can improve on definitely proved to be rewarding for me. And so my biggest goal is always my family, my faith, our farm, our community, and so to focus my energy to where that seems fit. So my time always gets pulled in a million different ways, and sometimes I think I'm involved in too many things. But at the end of the year, when I look back, I always feel pretty rewarded for where my time was spent. So we can maybe just refocus a little bit more on the me time. We'll keep pushing forward nonetheless.
What does me time look like for you?
I'm a pretty big outdoorsman. I like to hunt and fish and hunting activities and even just driving the backcountry logging roads and see what I might see. So maybe that extra 30 minutes a day of decompression or a couple extra hunting trips back to South Dakota with my brother-in-law Lance or something along those lines. So it seems like if I just don't put something on the schedule, it doesn't happen. So that's what I need to make a priority. Get it on the schedule, because then it's got the time slotted and I go do it. So
Well, there you go. Well, here's to a great rest of 2025, a profitable and goal slaying 2026 of spending time with your family also in there, and also booking a hunting trip and getting out to South Dakota to shoot some birds. Well, hey, I appreciate so much the conversation today, Galen, and thanks for joining me on the podcast.
absolutely appreciate your time today, and I really appreciate the podcast that you put together. And I catch probably about 90% of them. So keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You just heard from Galen Smith of Coldstream Farms in Washington State here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I hope this episode brought value to you, and if it did, please take a minute to give it a rating, a review, or a share to someone you know who needs to hear this conversation today. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thanks for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Until next time, keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy.